Hi all, thanks for tuning in. I'm going to discuss the current issue in education of supporting English language learners. I'm going to highlight pressing issues and varying support we can provide to our ELL students. First, I want to start off by highlighting the shifting terminology used. Historically, the term ESL was used, however, schools have shifted to using ELL. This has occurred because it's recognizing that the majority of students that are ELL speak more than one language and that English is not necessarily the second language they are learning. This is an act of inclusion in order to not marginalize students and avoid the labeling process that minimizes their ability to speak several languages. It also aids in supporting the issue of valuing other languages and its importance. To continue, I wanted to highlight three primary issues facing ELL students. Those issues are rising population, low graduation rate, and continued misidentification of ELL students having a learning disability. To go more in depth, I wanted to highlight the rising population of ELL students in Virginia. On the right, the graph demonstrates neighboring counties' ELL population for the 2017-2018 school year. Notably, Manassas City Schools have the highest ELL population of 49%, which is also the largest population in all of Virginia. As we can see, there is an increasing rise in ELL students in school districts. Another pressing issue is the low graduation rates for ELL students. As depicted, 69.9% of ELL students graduated in 2015-2016 compared to the 84% of the general student population that graduated. These statistics here are on a national scale. This is a continued issue of ELL students due to the achievement gap established and the other multitude of systemic issues that ELL students face. Last, but certainly not least of the issues, is the continued misidentification of ELL students as having learning disabilities. Repeatedly, ELL students are misidentified as a student with a disability because of the lower academic achievement. This cycle of misidentification is being addressed through implementing RTI, which stands for the Response to Intervention, to ensure students are not misidentified at an earlier stage. Now that I have identified some pressing issues, let's discuss how we as teachers can best support English language learners. In order to best support ELL students, our pedagogy must be rooted in cultural relevancy. This acts as the foundation to allow for best practices to be applied in the classroom and benefit ELL students. A few key components to this support is by supporting social and emotional factors for the student. Understanding how this language learning process is impacting the student is essential. We must ask ourselves when planning, what role does this lesson play in my student's identity? Another support tool is to practice collectivism in the classroom. Furthermore, we must prepare to teach speakers of stigmatized varieties of speech and understanding how stigmatized dialects and how we approach these students when assisting them acts in social change of how language guides power dynamics and sense of identity. Since culturally relevant pedagogy drives our support to ELL students, let's evaluate some systems, structures that are in place to support ELL students. There are four primary support structures utilized in schools. The first is ESL classrooms, which is also considered the best practice. In this model, co-teaching is the focus and usually takes the form of team-taught courses. Another support model is content-based ESL that focuses on English as the primary instructive method, where there are small self-contained classrooms. This model usually takes priority in large schools where there are many students who do not speak the same home language. This is so that they can address many students at one time. The other model is a dual language program, which is a very controversial program as educators argue about how English is not prioritized in this setting. However, in actuality, this system is great for validating and encouraging other languages aside from English. The last model are newcomer schools. These schools focus on more basic linguistic principles. These schools are typically for immigrant and refugee students. To continue, Let's now look at the best practices across all curriculums in order to support our ELL students. One of the best practices is utilizing integrated English language development. This practice focuses on being more intentional in language usage and approaches the classroom through scaffolding techniques. Furthermore, it emphasizes comprehensible input and output because it notes that the ability to use the language is equally as important as sharing the language. An example of this is the Give One, Get One activity, where students share something they know about the subject and then receive new information from a peer. Most importantly, this method advocates that all teachers understand the linguistic process of learning a new language on a developmental level. Another best practice that can be utilized across curriculums is visual learning. Providing accommodations to ELL students using visual and textual representation assists their learning process. A best way to do visual learning is through schematic representation, as depicted on the right in the image. The representation allows for students to move beyond pictorial representation because schematic representation gives opportunities to relay causal, sequence, spatial, numerical, and other concepts through visual imagery. However, within all of this, it is important to note that visuals utilized cannot result in a cognitive overload for our ELL students. Exploring experiential learning principles across all subject areas is a great tool for supporting ELL learners. 3 takeaways can be applied to supporting our students, such as incorporating project-based learning, PBL, as it is a good tool to apply collectivism. And incorporating a lot of discussion in the classroom is also a great tool for ELL learners, as this allows for more oral learning to be utilized in the classroom. A good way to do this is through the Think, Pair, Share strategy. And a last takeaway is for the teacher to be a facilitator in the classroom. This is an essential process because the essence of supporting ELL students is to allow them to exchange ideas, not nitpick grammar. As facilitators, we must ask the right questions that allow ELL students to analyze and evaluate in order for them to progress academically. A good best practice to support ELL students is utilizing formative assessments. This type of assessment allows for strengthened student-teacher relationships, acts as a form of self-assessment and an opportunity for teachers to adjust their approaches and strategies. It provides constant feedback to the students on a continuous loop, and it further strengthens teachers' knowledge of the language learning process. An important best practice that is often not implemented when addressing how to support ELL students is the need to involve the administration. Building a strong professional development model between administrators, general educators, and ELL educators is an essential part to developing best practices for this group of students. A good way to also demonstrate support is advocating for better relationships to be established between the administration and ELL families. Community engagement is very important to support in creating an inclusive school and community dedicated to the success of each individual student. Though implementing cross-curriculum practices for supporting ELL students is the route for success, I wanted to highlight some specific practices by the 4 core subjects. I'm going to highlight my content area of history, but please take a moment to read about your content area. For history, a good practice is utilizing different textual sources such as graphic novels and historical fiction. These provide excellent visual learning opportunities, and the material is much more friendly and approachable. Through this exercise, I would do a compare and contrast activity where students need to highlight the information in the novel or graphic and how it relates to the content learned in the class. As we conclude, I want to take a moment to highlight the 2 key takeaways. The first being, committing to cultural relevant pedagogy is the route to supporting ELL students and provides a platform for best practices to even be applied. And the second takeaway of cross-curriculum measures is essential for supporting ELL students. These are the 2 points that I want you to remember when learning how to best support your ELL students. Here at the end now, I have my references. There are some great resources out there and easily available, specifically a lot that feature different lesson plans that emphasize engaging ELL students through discussion and how to do so within your specific content area. Thank you for listening.